What's up guys, Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com. So in today's video we're going to check out the new features contained in the newest version of D5 Render version 2.6. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. So D5 Render is continuing their trend of putting out new releases that add a number of awesome features to the program, and version 2.6 is no exception. There's a number of interesting features contained inside of this new version. And so you can find out more about all of the new features that were added in the What's New in D5 Render version 2.6 blog post, which I will link to in the notes down below. That's going to get into these in a little bit more detail. But let's take a look at some of these new features. All right, so we're going to start off with the most interesting new feature, which is the AI atmosphere match. And so this is kind of what I imagine artificial intelligence should be doing with rendering programs. Instead of trying to like completely change your scene, what this does is this allows you to upload a reference image in order to set up your environment for you. So in this case, I've downloaded a sunset scene from Pexels. All right, and so what we're going to do is we're going to click on this button right here. We're going to upload a reference image. And then once you've done that, I had to click on the Snap Current View button like this. But then once you do that, you can click on the Start Generating button and click on Apply. And when you do that, what that's going to do is that's going to take the style from your image and use it to set up the background style in your scene. So notice what this does is this is basically setting up my scene with like kind of a sunset sky based on that reference image that we put in here. So I'm literally able to take a photo, and I'm not sure if it's generating an image or picking a matching HDRI, but it matches the environment of your photo. All right, so we're going to try this again with another photo from Pixabay. So it's just kind of a farmhouse with some clouds in here, but we're going to snap our view and then click on Start Generating right here and click on Apply. And that's going to go through and that's going to apply the lighting based on that image. So again, you can see that this is kind of picking something that kind of matches up with this image in your scene like this in order to match up with what's being shown in that image. And then you can come in here obviously and adjust some things, but it gets you in kind of a nice starting point without you having to go look up all the different HDRI images and stuff like that. I think what it's doing is it's just finding something that matches up with what's in your image, but I'm not 100% sure. But in any case, this is definitely an interesting tool for setting up your environments and scenes. All right, so next up, we have the ability to use artificial intelligence in order to automatically generate maps for your material. So PBR maps, specifically in this case, I think it's the normal, the roughness, and the displacement. And so let's say that I had a new material like this one and I was to just load in a material map. So in this case, maybe like a cedar material like this, but none of the normal or the specular or anything like that. Well, there's a button here, right here. There's a button up here where if you click on it, this is going to automatically generate maps for a couple of these down here based on your image. So it's actually going to make up its own maps and load them into these slots right here in order for you to get that more PBR material look. So you can see how now this has generated its own normal map and its own roughness map in here. Notice how if I adjust this, you can see that this actually does a pretty good job of generating those maps based on just an image. So notice how I can adjust the normals like this in order to make that bumpier or not, and I can adjust the the roughness to adjust how much it reflects. So if you just have an image and you want to generate these maps, this AI generated texture maps could be super helpful. So we've also got this new video material to multimedia material transparency. And so what this one does is it basically allows you to simulate TV screens by having you have not only an image on the surface, but also a reflection on top of it like this. So it's giving you that kind of like semi-transparent glow effect. So if you're creating things with screens, this one's actually super interesting depending on what you're trying to do there. All right, so under the Effects tab, there's two new settings that you can use in order to basically get better lighting in the scene. And so the highlight local exposure is going to suppress the highlights in the scene so that you're not losing detail, while the shadows is going to do kind of the opposite, and it's going to brighten up dark areas. So like for example, notice how this is brightening up these areas in the background where you've got a little bit more shadow in the background, so it's going to reveal some different details. So these are things that I would definitely play around with, but I think they give you the opportunity to really kind of control the lighting in your scene a lot better. All right, so next up we have a new material over in the materials section for flowing water. And so this is helpful for a lot of different things, or for creating different effects. Like for example, you've got a couple effects in here for creating things like waterfalls or falling water. So you can use this in order to quickly simulate waterfalls. Notice how there are options in here to adjust things like the transparency of the water, depending on what you want that to do, as well as adding things like foam and adjusting the flow velocity. So you can make things flow faster, slower, whatever you want. And so in addition to being able to do that on vertical surfaces like this, and we'll just select this material right here just so you can kind of see, you also have the ability to basically generate things like streams. So for example, say I wanted this water to be flowing the other direction, I could scroll down and I could adjust the rotation of that water like this. So we'll say 90 degrees. You can also adjust kind of the size of that setting right here, but this gives you the ability to really quickly generate moving water inside of your scenes. So, and again, we can set things like the flow velocity, other things like that. Note that the direction the water flows is going to be driven by the UV mapping of the material. So just make sure you're paying attention to that, because that's going to drive the way the water is going to behave in D5 render. So another great feature that's been added is if you look at the textures on this surface right here, you can kind of see them tiling off in the distance, right? So you can see how the image is repeated. Like there's no ugly seams, it's a seamless texture, but the darker areas are clearly repeating and giving you kind of a pattern right here. Well, if you select that material in the inspector and you scroll down, there's now an option in here for UV randomizer. And so when you run the UV randomizer, what it's going to do is it's going to randomize the way that texture is applied to this surface so that there's no longer any perceivable tiling in here. So let's say that we toggle this off, and we'll make this material even smaller so that you can see it right here. But then if I run the UV randomizer, notice how it still randomizes this where you don't have that tiling anymore. That is massively helpful for big open spaces like this, where you don't want to have that effect of the same texture repeating over and over again. So another cool feature is when you're lighting your scene with an HDRI image, if you scroll down, there's now an option in here, in addition, to have your sun follow the HDRI, right? So if this HDRI moves like this, notice how the sun is following along with that. There's now an option in here to customize that, where you can customize the altitude of the sun in the sky. So you can kind of move the sun around, and you can adjust both the altitude and the azimuth of the sun, allowing you to quickly adjust the way that your shadows show up in your scene. And so this is something that probably is best played with just a little bit, and not necessarily like massively changed when it comes to your HDRI. But if you do want to light your scene with an HDRI and move your sun around, you can use this feature in order to do that. If you add snow to your model, so if you go into the precipitation settings and set this to snow rather than rain, you've got the ability to adjust the size of the flakes that are falling in the scene. So definitely kind of more of a visual thing for sure, but it does give you the ability to do some customization in here with the way that that effect is created. The water material has been optimized with additional settings that allow you to control the color of the light scattered in the water, which is going to allow you to create more realistic water scenes, or at least more dialed in water scenes if you are using water in your renders. So we've also got some tools in here for like camera path editing, which they demo on their channel. And so this is one I need to dive into a little bit more. I've not been able to get it working quite like they're showing on the screen. It's probably something that I'm doing, but you do have the ability to adjust this camera path for the animation, allowing you to kind of move it around to adjust the way that the camera is looking, the heights of the different points, other things like that. So super cool feature. I'm just not quite up to speed on exactly how to get it running. And then another feature which I think is really cool is they've also got camera templates. And remember, you've got to be in video mode for this to work. But if I click on template right here, notice what it's got is it's got all of these different kinds of camera movements in here. So say I wanted to add a horizontal pull, I would just click on this. Notice how it's going to create a horizontal pull. So it's already kind of a pre-made animation or movement right here based on my current camera location. So, I mean, honestly, I could come in here and create multiple different movements that are going to be kind of the more like professional camera movements in here really quickly, because these are already kind of pre-set up. So those are super interesting. And then you could also adjust the length of those just by clicking on that button right here. So notice how this is going to be slower. But if you want to quickly add some professional camera movements, you can just click to add these in your scene. They've also added a walk navigation mode. So previously it's been orbit and fly, but now this is going to keep you kind of like head height above the ground, and you can actually walk around in your scene. So if you want to navigate in that way, you can do that using walk mode. Note that that does have collision implemented, meaning you can't walk through walls, you can only walk on objects in your scene. So if you're looking for like a human point of view mode for your navigation, we've got that with this new walk mode. And so section planes have had a number of different improvements, including the ability to flip the direction, other things like that. One of my favorites is the fill color and fill material. So if I was to click on preview fill color, for example, you can see how that's basically generating a fill wherever this is cutting across this model. Well, one thing that you can do is you can also place a material in here. And so let's say we were to drop a concrete material in here like this one, and obviously this one's a little more detailed than I would like, but you can use this in order to add materials to your section cuts, which I think is super interesting. And then we've got a number of other improvements, like for example, you now have the ability to drag material maps directly from a folder into D5. So for example, say you just had a material that you just wanted to drag into D5 from Windows, you can drag that in and place that on an object. You also have control over the Alembic or the ABC files that you can bring in, giving you the ability to basically play those animation files, and you can control things like speed, animation interval, other things like that. Then there's a ton of other things that have been added in here, like improvement of the render queue. Oh, and the procedurally generated vines is super cool as well. Let's go ahead and demo that one. So we're going to jump back over here. I'm going to get rid of this section plane, and what I want to do is I want to add some vines to this scene. And so we're just going to go into our browser, under nature, vines. Notice how there's options for procedurally generated vines. Note that these appear to be a pro only feature from what I'm seeing right now, but let's say that we wanted to add one of these in, you can just click to download it, and then you can just place it against a wall. So right here. And so notice how when you place it, it's going to give you this little blue thing coming off of it. So if I toggle this, right, notice it's showing you where it's going to generate that vine. So in this case, it's going to place this on this wall right here. I'm going to click on the option for generate, and that's going to procedurally generate the vines in here. And you can adjust things like the scale, the density of the leaves, things like that. Notice how this is adjusting automatically. I can click on the random button and it's going to randomly generate some things about the vines, but you can also move this around and then regenerate that. But you can set this to adjust things like the length of the leaves that are in here, the width of the effect, right? So if I wanted this to be narrower or not as narrow, I can do that right here. You can just do a ton of interesting things with these vines. And then we've also got a new HDRI library where you can search for different HDRIs. We've got new futuristic particles, so different particle settings that are in here, as well as new character models, just a ton of different things that have been added in here. If you want to talk about any of these more in depth, leave a comment down below. I definitely recommend you check this out because there's almost too many in here to even talk about, which is pretty typical for D5 at this point. They're doing a really good job of adding new features. They also have this cool feature where you can keep group structure info when you import from SketchUp. I'll link to D5 Render in the notes down below. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this new version. I just love having that conversation with you guys. Also, if there's anything you'd like me to cover more in depth, let me know. I can definitely do that. But as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.